Now I'm good.
Perfect. Okay, welcome everybody to our Planning Commission meeting this evening. Let's go ahead and get started. We will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all please stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Thank you. Really quickly, I'm going to just take just a second with a little kind of thought, my traditional Centerville history lesson. And part of the reason why for those of you who are newer or haven't been around as long, part of the reason why I've done this is just to kind of, where I can, point out previous planning and how that planning has panned out or not panned out in some cases. But in this particular case, it actually is a little bit of a planning situation. So what's interesting is, did you know that the current address system in Centerville has not always been the current address system in Centerville? And in fact, back in the 40s and 50s and into the 60s, Davis County pushed really hard for a county-wide address system, kind of like Salt Lake County has. And they used it for a long time. Parish Lane, for example, was 3200 South. Porter Lane was 3600 South. Pages Lane was 4000 South. Main Street was not Main Street, this road right here. It was 4th East, or Highway 91A, because Highway 91 was actually out where the freeway is now. And then 4th East was 6th East. Anyway, so and that obviously continued down, and so Bountiful all had bigger south numbers than Centerville had and whatnot. And I don't know exactly when it changed or when it broke down, sometime in the probably late 60s or so. Every city in Davis County went back and said, you know what, we're going to do our own thing, forget this. And so that's when everything changed for Centerville to have Main Street become Main Street, and 6th East became 4th East, and so on. So just kind of an interesting thing from the past, where there was a plan to unify the addressing system for the county, and it broke down and didn't work. So maybe I'll figure out exactly why that is for next time I give a thought.
Was it built off of South Temple or something?
It was built off of Farmington. Everything came out of Farmington, and so maybe everybody decided we didn't want to be subordinate to Farmington. I don't know. I'll offer a really brief prayer, and then we'll get going. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the opportunity we have to gather together as citizens of this city and to do the planning that we are tasked with by the city. We thank Thee that we are free to make these decisions on behalf of the residents of the city, and we think that we are able to do so in a respectful and in professional manner. We bless that we can continue to have that camaraderie and work well together to find common goals and common solutions. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, let's, the first item on the agenda, no, did you want to introduce that, or should we just?
I think we should introduce it and table it to your next meeting.
Yes.
That
So-
way we can preserve the noticing.
Great. So this item, it's a public hearing, small subdivision waiver for 1441 North Main Street. And this item, the applicant has notified us that they were not going to be here tonight. So I will make a motion that we table this item to a future planning commission meeting. Is that sufficient, Lisa?
Do you want to just table it to the next meeting? I think that's what the applicant requested, and then we have a date certain.
You want to have a date certain? Okay, we'll table it to the next meeting. Great.
I second
Thank
the
you.
motion.
So we have a motion to table and a second. Any discussion to that motion? Okay, we'll start down on that end then.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. That motion passes. The item has been tabled. Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right. Next time.
Next time.
Next meeting.
Date certain.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along to the next item on the agenda, has also been scheduled for a public hearing. This is a zone map amendment to remove the hillside overlay at 975 North, 610 East. This one is a legislative decision. We'll turn the time over to Corey for this one.
Thank you, Chair Daly. And
Briefly, Whitney, are you trying to show this on the screens? The agenda or the information?
It should be, right? If you want to pull up those.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Matt.
I mean, the public may want to see what's going on.
Yes.
Delayed for a second.
switching cameras.
Thank you.
There we go. Okay, now for real, Corey.
Thank you, Chair Daly. Members of the commission, as indicated, this is a zone map amendment, so it is a legislative decision. The role of the planning commission is to debate the merits in accordance with our ordinances and general plan criteria and make a recommendation to the city council. And so tonight you'll be looking at the request for a change to the overlay. So just to step back, for those of you or the public may want to know, we have various zoning districts throughout the city. So you have your commercial areas, your residential areas, and sometimes we have different categories within the different type of use areas. We call that the base zoning. So the case before you is a piece of property that is located in the RL zone, which is a residential low, basically a single-family zoning district. In areas, strategically, sometimes we put an overlay over the top of certain areas. So an example is South Main Street also has an overlay where we have some additional regulations that come into play based on what we want to accomplish. In the case tonight, it's called the hillside overlay. And the hillside overlay is really looking at topography, erosion, geologic hazards, things of that nature. So the city has chosen that in certain areas, the base zoning might be in place, but we're going to overlay a certain group. Most of the time, though, the overlay is generally associated with approaching into the foothills area. And so we look at slopes during development. We look at erosion control and stormwater management. We also consider geologic hazards, such as surface fault rupture, a landslide area, something of that nature that might be present as development occurs. Mr. Mark Knight has petitioned the city. He lives at 975 North, 610 East, and so on your zoning map, if there's 610 East, you see 3 lots that are just east of the cul-de-sac on the picture. Those 3 lots have been the subject of the staff report, so I just point out those 3 lots. Mr. Knight is the middle lot just east of the cul-de-sac, or the second one in from Chase Lane, or whatever east we put that. And so the request for Mr. Knight is to remove the hillside overlay from that property at 975 North, 610 East. The impetus driving this is Mr. Knight has some improvements on his property. It's been there for quite some time. Is making some modifications to those improvements, and he might explain to you some of those if you're interested. But really what comes into play is how much coverage of the lot improvements can take. The base zoning of RL allows every lot to improve with your driveways, your gazebos, your fire pits, your house, your tough sheds, your detached garages. You can improve up to 60% of your lot in improvements, and the other remaining 40% is to be yard areas for the lot, essentially. In the hillside overlay, that drops it from 60% to 40% of your lot. The hillside overlay also has a lot of other components. You're looking for 5,000 square feet of contiguous space, slopes that are not 30% or more. So there's a lot of other regulations that come into play because you're trying to manage the drain, the stormwater, cuts and fills for yards. We don't want to just go on a steep slope and just start scarring the steep slope into a bunch of retaining walls in order to build something. So that's why we're trying to lower that improvement amount to try to reduce that impact that might occur on a hillside. In the case before you, it appears, I don't have the data exact, but even from the application from Mr. Knight, they're likely at 40% or more already. And if you look at the aerial photos and Google Earth, and I went up there and drove by it, putting up the signs, there's a good chance that those smaller lots in this development are above the 40% or right at the 40%. And so that's why Mr. Knight would like to change his to handle some of the existing improvements and some expansions and allow him some breathing room for some more improvements that he's planning for his property. So that's why he would like to remove that overlay from that piece of property. In the staff report, we bring up, you're in this northwest neighborhood. It's a single-family area primarily. I bring up the issue of the hillside. There's a number of things we're trying to accomplish in the hillside, and I just try to highlight those in the staff report. But we also look in a zone map amendment. We look at what impacts a change would have on adjacent property, how harmonious it is with adjacent property. We're trying to find those relationships and make sure that as we zone and change zones, that we are considering the area surrounding and if that change has some negativity to it. So staff pointed out to, in our report, is we looked at the subdivision itself because part of our what we don't have a clear history on is what happened over time. This was recorded in, this cul-de-sac area is 1992 was recorded, and I believe it was later that, a few years later, that the subject property was recorded in a plat. So they were obviously by two different owners, as well as being in two different zones. In research, the hillside overlay was in place. What I don't have is understanding what it was like in the early 90s versus now, other than that we have not done significant changes to the hillside overlay that I'm aware of since 2003 for sure. Because we took the 2003 new zoning districts and we drew the hillside into it. So the hillside ordinance was already existing and we just drew that into the 2003 ordinance, and we've made, I think, one minor amendment since I've been here in 2004 to the hillside. So tracking properties over time, improvements being made, I'm not sure what went on, if it is over the 40%, why did that happen? I mean, there's a lot of questions to come into play. But we are where we're at. So staff kind of looked at this idea of what was in this zone. They're both R110, so what are the lot sizes within the area that was platted? And these three lots are generally the smallest. They're running just 10,000 to 12,000 square feet, which meets the R110 back in the early subdivision. The other lots are going to start creeping up. Most of them start creeping up to 14,000 and up to 18,000 in the subdivision plat. So these generally are the three smallest, obviously owned by the same property owner, and the way they platted the streets, it created these three smaller lots. I looked at the Shadow Mountain because this is the idea of harmonious, and the Shadow Mountain is pretty much the 10 to 12,000 square foot. So again, there are different owners, different subdivisions, but it's seemingly that transition, if you look at the eastern three lots in the Shadow Mountain, just west of the three lots we're talking about with Mr. Knight's property, that's right about you start having that transition zone with some grades. And you see some splitting going on. So if you look at the larger lots just to the south or the bottom of the screen, you can see that they did their retaining on those larger lots, right about that transitional area. And so from our perspective is at some point in time, somebody drew the line where it was at. But this also is seemingly that the lots to the west were not in the hillside. As we start to transition, the lots to the east were in the hillside. And then we get up into a flat area. If you look at the central core of the subdivision, it's fairly flat. And then you get up into you see the yellow on the far right before the green. That's when you really get into the hill slope. I mean, that's the 30% slope areas and the concerns are there. And so the staff was kind of saying, well, is this a transitional area? Our assumption is yes, it's a transitional area. Could the 3 lots that are currently in the hillside been originally slated to be out of the hillside like the Shadow Mountain subdivision is? Could have. We could have decided that, well, there was enough slope change that we wanted them in, but we didn't do it with the Shadow Mountain lots where the actual transition takes place. So I think what staff is kind of looking at is we've got 3 lots that are fairly small, they're more akin to what's outside the subdivision in generalities. The other lots are large enough, if you hit 14, 15, 18,000 square feet, you have large areas of your lot to make improvements on, and the 40% is not so constraining. But these 3 lots, the 40% is fairly constraining, and it looks like pattern of improvements shows that. And so from staff's perspective is what do we recommend? And there's really kind of 2 options here. Well, there's 3. One is they just simply don't want to amend the zone, and that's a default decision by it is what it is today. The other one is to consider Mr. Knight's request singular for his lot and grant an opportunity for the hillside to be removed if we see fit for that, looking at this criteria. But staff kind of believes that the overlay is not really a lot by lot design. It really is a geographical design, a geographical area. Could we do it lot by lot? Certainly you could do it by lot. But we're kind of thinking, from our perspective, if the commission and council eventually agree this transitional and it's not the greatest concern for erosion, hillside, geologic, because we have existing development, the 3 lots being constrained and small, we're thinking we should expand the request from a single lot maybe to those 3 lots. By state law, if we were to do that, we have to give direct notice if this is not a petition from a property owner in order to change anything in the zoning map to a property owner that's not in the petition request. We have to give them sufficient notice of that consideration. So we're recommending option 1 is not doing it by lot, probably at least include these 3 lots. I think an argument could be made for something even broader about existing development, but I tried not to expand it that far in my thinking. But maybe table the action, let's give notice to the north and the south property owner from Mr. Knight, come back to another meeting and say we might be considering all 3 lots and allow those property owners to participate in the process, see what their what they think about their lots. I'm assuming by default, if they've improved above the 40%, they may be more supportive of it. Yeah.
We're all here. Corey,
Right. Hang on, we'll give you a minute, okay? We'll give you a turn.
But we just think it should be those 3 at minimum. Do we have to go there? No, but we think it should be, and then we could come back to a later meeting after we've given the official notice required by state law and debate it, and then make a decision one way or another based on the 3, if you're so inclined. So that's kind of our recommendation.
Okay?
Not kind of, it is our
That's your
recommendation.
recommendation. Okay. Thanks, Corey. So, Let's say that we were to take your recommendation and table this, how quickly do you think that could turn around? Is that a next meeting, or based on noticing, is that a month out, or what are you talking about?
I think let's see, to notice the petition could be preserved with a tabling to your next meeting. I think you're making a great question, since it's been 2003 that we've gone in as a city-initiated, expansion. I know that we have to notify the owner. I don't know if there's a time frame. Is that a 10-day lease, Lisa? Or
That's
is that?
probably at least 10 days.
Is it 10-day? So that would put us, for the 14th, we could still meet that notice. It would have to go out tomorrow. Well, it'd have to go out we'd have to go out later, because we have minimum notice for your next meeting's the 1st. So it'd probably have to be just after the 1st.
Right.
Because we can't include the day of the hearing is the 10 days.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay. Do any of the other commissioners have questions for Corey or any other staff?
Just to clarify, if we relieve the overlay requirement for those 3 lots, it's going from a 40% requirement to a 60%.
Yeah, it would remove the overlay, leave it in the base zone, and they could do up to 60% of the lot in improvements.
And then, sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. I'm just curious, did you just choose those 3 lots because they were adjacent?
I looked at adjacent and sizing,
So what about?
and existing
like,
improvements too.
What about like the lot that's directly south of it? Or, yeah, south of it, 602.
The larger one?
No, they're like
You're talking about 927?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses south. Like, it looks like it doesn't, I guess I'm,
Scroll up, the 5th one is still a large lot. See that large lot right there?
keep going. That guy with the red line.
Oh,
Yeah.
So so I guess I kind of like.
Yeah, I didn't look that
I kind of hear
far.
what you're saying, and you're saying, let's make it so what is existing meets the zoning. And I'm saying, well, why not this guy too? Why not this guy too? Why not this? Like,
No, it's a great question, because I think you could expand the argument that most of that flat area that's up on the table could be removed. So the issue is making sure that we have a contiguous line of a geographic area and not just select certain lots.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think there was some discussion as well with staff about the topography. So these 3 lots that are proposed, or recommended possibly for amendment, are fairly flat, but as you move into those larger 3 lots just to the south, not going all the way.
Yeah, you can see
There
the
is some
retaining.
elevation change. I won't say significant, but there's more elevation
More
change in
elevation.
those. And the purpose of the hillside ordinance is to address some of those geologic issues as well as providing a buffer.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point. There are probably many areas of existing development that the overlay sits on that probably create this type of tension and constraint. But we have a property owner right now that says, hey, I think it might be an over amount needed for my lot and property. And so I'm looking at the geographic boundary. We could shift it for 1 lot, we could shift it for the 3 lots, we could shift it for 30 if we want to go that far. But I think at this point in time, most of that subdivision outside of those 3 lots sit at a much larger rate. So they have ability to improve their property as they see fit because of the large lot size. And I'm just saying, if we're going to adjust it for this lot, if the argument holds weight, at least adjust it for these 2 others too. And then other ones that might be, 700, 800 feet away, if they feel like they're experiencing it, they could come in and do that.
Is that something that could be amended, like, once we notice it for the 3 lots potentially?
We could amend it for the 3 lots.
But could others come in and say, me too?
They could, they'd add themselves to the petition, or a separate petition for their own geographic area.
Sure. Okay. So, all right, any other questions for staff on this one?
I guess I look, if we do that, keep expanding it, it's like a Pandora's box, that we could go all the way to South Centerville, all the way to North Centerville, and then this one small thing could blow up to be like every commissioner's meeting for the next, year.
Yeah.
Yeah, the trailer effect.
Yeah.
To play devil's advocate with you a little bit, actually, well, that's actually kind of how I feel about it, though, is that I think that this approach is better than a lot-by-lot type of an approach, like individual spot adjustment.
How often has this happened in regards to the overlay being asked to be removed?
Most of the overlays built out, because it's been in place for as much as these subdivisions. We have some raw areas to the north that are, so we have the Rigby Court that fell into this jurisdiction, but it was a little bit flatter area, but we had to, they amended the hillside simply because the 5,040%, the 5,000 square feet is it's 5,000 square feet or 40%, whichever is less. They had some large acre lots, and so they wanted to get out of the 5,000 limitation and get up to the 40
Yeah.
limitation. So how they got out of the 5,000 was they put an additional storm drain in for each lot to get up to the 40%. So, but I would say we have a limit, most of our development that's going to happen is going to be the north, the Rigby Farm. That area up there will be the area that the hillside still plays a role in. So, an argument could be made is much of the hillside that may be in the original R110, this hillside probably gives the same constraint to anybody who's around 10,000 square feet. If you hit 15,000, you probably have ability to make your normal improvements to your property.
Yeah, I think we can talk more about this as a commission in a minute. So in the meantime,
I have a question.
yes, Mason, go ahead.
So, if you were to start from scratch for a hillside overlay, what would the criteria that you would say are appropriate for creating a hillside overlay?
Yeah, that's a great question because we really need to amend our hillside overlay to further address geologic hazards. I mean, we address them, but probably not to today's standards that we should be. We just rely on those studies to get us there. Yeah, I think it would be slopes above 20%, history of geologic hazards, history of for surface fault rupture. And I'll be honest with you, if I were starting it all over, knowing kind of the topography, there would be quite a bit of removal from the hillside overlay.
So do you imagine, Corey, your 20% rule, you're gonna start maybe, Main Street where it's relatively flat, and in the first point where we hit 20%, from that point east it goes up, even if it levels out, or?
You can't do it all just on topography. That would be one criteria we'd analyze, is see how the contour lines fit into all that. But, we have surface fault ruptures that are outside of that 20% slope, and so that's going to be another place that we're going to look at. So some of those things. And I think that, once you start hitting 20%, you're really starting to struggle with your stormwater management from lot to lot. You can even struggle at 15%, but 15% still a reasonable place to develop. Your 20% is where you really start to have some trouble. So we'll look at those slopes and topography where to start over. We look at the mapping and the surface fault, because surface faults are identified and inferred. We would follow that guideline. We have some history of landslides, mass wasting is the technical term for it. And the other thing I think you can throw into the hillside is its effect on wildland fires. So at your canyon mouths and things like that would be another place to add into that. But we go all the way down to Main Street in the northeast section, and I think that's probably much from a development. Maybe great for fireworks, but probably much.
Well, that's where I was headed. So, it goes all of everything east and then goes, and who and why and how was that evaluation made? Because frankly, and this is sort of getting into the discussion, when we make a legislative amendment, I don't care about the applicant in specific. I care about whether or not this is a good idea in general. And I don't like spot zoning, and so I'm a little bit antagonistic towards it, so I'd like to understand, rather than make an evaluation based on this lot, whether or not our hillside overlay is acting or is not acting, but is imposed in an inappropriate manner. Because if it's inappropriate, let's reevaluate. But if it's appropriate, why spot zone? That's where my question is.
That's a good point. I would say there's some archaic reasoning to it, because I think North Centerville was the newer growth area back in 85, the early 70s, or mid 70s to 85, so they have aggressive geographic boundary with that. You get to the south and you can see it starts to taper off, and it'll hit those slopes down by Island View Drive and so forth, and hit those. But I do think it's a bit outdated, particularly how we're handling existing development and improvements for existing properties too. But I agree with you, 3 lots is pretty marginal. I just went with the geographic area of what I thought was reasonable carve rather than a lot by lot, but I'm with you when you say overlays a broader purpose.
Well, could you make an argument, though, that the overlay for much of the city has served its purpose as it's guided the development of the hillside? And for these areas where the hillside is developed, maybe it's less meaningful now
Yeah,
than
I
it once
mean,
was.
if you look at what I call the tabletop section of this subdivision, you drive through there, you don't have a slope and you don't have stormwater management that can't be that's sloughing off to someone else's lot because of a steep backyard. So, I could make the argument that a good portion of that subdivision shouldn't even be in the hillside. But I'm not ready to, until we
Initiate
go
that
back in a
development.
further analysis, I'm not ready to, waste it away now. I'm on a simple carve on a request of somebody from the public.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think at this point, we would just be speculating. We haven't done that analysis.
sure, yeah. Besides, it's a future goal that we would get far down the road and the city council wouldn't approve, so it's fine. Okay, let's move on then. Any other questions for staff? No? Okay. So here's the way we're going to proceed with the next little bit. We're going to give the applicant an opportunity to speak to this issue. In particular, I think we're interested in hearing from the applicant and thoughts on expanding this to the 3 lots and how that would affect the applicant's project. After the applicant, we will have a public hearing. We'll give members of the public an opportunity to come to speak to this issue as well. So let's go ahead and invite the applicant to come forward, and if you'd introduce yourself, please.
This all seems very formal. My name's Mark Knight, my wife Andrea, neighbours to the south, neighbours to the north. Of those, we're all here, we're all the owners of those 3 properties in question. I've been in Centerville since 2005 in this house, and I actually know Sean personally as a friend, and I will say that I've enjoyed my experience working with Corey and his guidance in this issue. So I'm a CPA by trade, and I own a FedEx route down here at I can't even speak, sorry. Down at the FedEx place down there next to Franklin. So anyway, so I don't have your presence in the community, but I have a small presence. So I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. To talk a little bit about the properties, obviously I'm appealing for my property because I can't do it for other people. I can only do my own. And I have talked to both of my neighbours about the notice of this meeting and the purpose of this based on Corey's guidance. And I would be happy for them to come up after me and as members of the public and voice their thoughts as well. I will say the property to the north of me, the backyard is relatively close to being completed. Jared, with your place. And Neil can talk about his. He's got his to where he wants it. But in both cases, the slope of the property is what I wanted to talk about, is fairly uniform amongst the three houses. Kevin Campbell, the city engineer, then lives on the south side of Neil and Cheryl. And his slope, you can see on the picture, his yard is much bigger, but it goes terraced down. So to the point that was raised earlier, should we expand this out further? I think that, and I'm not the planning commission or the engineer, I think that would probably be a bookend because of that slope. Although, to Corey's point earlier, the lot is much larger, and so the 40% is not as constraining. We had a deck on our house that I demoed after 25 years this year, not realizing that it would throw me into this situation. Instead of repairing the existing, we demoed it and we're putting a new one there. So I have a plan to submit to the city, Public Works, as soon as if this goes ahead. Otherwise, we have a house right now that you walk out the backyard, you'll fall on your face and do a terrible injury. So the deck is in question, and the deck plan will have a roof over it too. That's why it needs to be separately approved. It'll join the existing house. We've already started to do some of the erosion measures that Corey and Kevin and I have talked about. We put a raised plant box alongside the entire west side of the backyard to stop any water, should there be any, going into the Toons property, which is right adjacent and west to us. Kevin would call that a berm. Put a berm in there to stop the water. We've never had in the since 2005, we've never had any water crawling over the edge there to him, unless I've sprayed him over the fence with my garden hose. Neil's property, the slope continues. There's a slight slope just going north to south, not much, and Jared's property is flat with ours too. So we've looked at the issue with water from our property being retained on our property according to state code, and we've never had a problem with that, but we've put that plant box in to berm it off of the west perimeter. We don't think anything needs to be done on the north and south because the land is just the same slope. So we are also open to potentially removing some of the concrete that's in the driveway and an RV pad that goes down the side and replacing that with pervious pavers at some great cost, but we're very much open to trying to manage the area for water seepage to go through by doing that. Right now we have a front yard, we have a backyard, and I think the house occupies mostly the 40% that's under the ordinance. So that would be including the old deck if we hadn't demoed that. But because of that, and we want to put that there, this came up as something that will block the city's approval on that because we both felt like that would exceed the 40%. And accordingly, we're here to see if we can get that overlay removed and give us up to 60%, which would be sufficient to have the deck. I don't know if I have anything else to add other than that. Do you have any questions of me?
Right. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? You've done a good job of explaining your thoughts and whatever else. So if we don't have any questions, that's because you've done a good job of explaining.
Okay. May I also say that to be pragmatic, because those owners are here, is there a way that we could avoid the notice period and make a recommendation, I think you said, to the state council, Corey? Sorry, I'm talking to you, Kevin.
No, that's okay.
Apologize.
And actually, maybe we pause there for just a second. And Corey, I did have that thought while Mr. Knight was talking. Is there a way to expand this petition to the neighboring properties to avoid having to start all over with that? Or it's too late for that? Or
Yeah, because Lisa,
Yeah, I just reviewed the state statute, and we do have to provide specific notice for zoning map amendments. They also have a recent legislative change where we have to give courtesy notice to individual property owners explaining the zone change and what it means. So no, we can't just expand this unilaterally without providing the notice.
Lisa was squirming in her seat when we
Mr. Chairman, may I suggest that notice could be verbal as well as written?
Well, there are specific requirements for how that
States,
notice
yeah.
has to happen.
Okay,
It's
Yes,
law.
good thought, doesn't fit within the law,
all right.
but yes.
like the pragmatic approach.
I like that pragmatic approach.
But remember, the
exactly.
state's not always pragmatic.
The state isn't known for being pragmatic, that's right, so. But yes, I appreciate your pragmatic thought there. So I think, back to your question then, if we were to table this and take that noticing approach, we're still gonna be at that next meeting, which would be the 14th of September, and it could get taken care of for us at that point, and then go to the city council shortly after that. So I think time-wise, we're probably the same.
Pretty close,
Even if we could
pretty
do it
pretty
here.
close to the
Makes
same.
sense.
Right, so. Any other questions for the applicant? No? Okay, thank you. So, at this point, we will invite the public to come forward and speak on this matter. Just as by way of information, for the public, if you'd like to ask questions, go ahead and do so. We will make a note of those and answer those at the end of the public hearing period in order to keep things going. Yeah, you want to?
Mr. Chairman, I did have one last thing I forgot to say.
You bet, come up.
I have a question for the planning commission.
Yes.
What do you feel is the downside of making this decision?
Yeah. Well, I
Because
would,
we haven't really talked about the downside. We've talked about what I want, my upside and everything, but what do you feel is the downside?
so I'll speak for me, and I guess we can have any of the other commissioners that would like to address this as well. But for me, you've heard the phrase kind of tossed around a couple of times about spot zoning and
Yes.
spot adjustments. Spot zoning is really kind of a bad way to manage a city and a bad way to manage zoning. And so by removing the overlay from your lot, that's the textbook definition of spot zoning. And so what we're trying to do is to say, let's not spot zone this, but let's look at it a little bit more broadly and try and decide, does this need to be expanded? And does it make sense for the area rather than the lot?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would just say that as the citizen making the appeal, I didn't envisage this becoming such a big potential issue. And so I am looking to make a deck this year, so.
Yes, understood, and that's part of the reason why I was asking Corey earlier about the timing of the whole noticing thing, so that it doesn't draw out, and it sounds like we could probably get it going, you could have it done by the winter if it goes smoothly, which I,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank
Good
you,
question.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, that's good. You know, I'll be honest with you, I really appreciate it when we don't have professional developers here, because it just feels so much more real, you know? Love it. Okay.
More tangible, right?
Yes, much more tangible, that's right. Okay, we'd like to invite any members of the public to come forward and address this issue if you'd like to, and you can introduce yourself, you don't have to. I mean, you do need to introduce yourself, but you don't have to speak, so.
Thank you. My name's Neil Brown. I live just south of Mark. We've been in our home, so I'm on 949 North. We've lived in our house since 1998. On my property, I am probably under the 40%. I've made no improvements there really to my house there and expanding it at all there. We just have, I've flattened out my backyard and we just have garden and a tree there and trees and stuff back there. I have no problem there with taking it off. I don't have any plans myself there. I don't necessarily have a need to have it taken off, but I have no objection to it either though, of having it taken off. So just wanted to say that. If you have any questions for me, that would be fine. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Commission, my name is Jared Pippin. I live directly north of the
Subject property.
subject property, 991 North, longtime resident, approximately 14 months. We moved in last summer, There's been a number of improvements done on my property. I don't have any immediate plans, but I have dreams. And I would like those dreams to be fulfilled one day, but very much in support of the removal of the hillside overlay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else? No? Well, yeah, that's fine. I just want to make sure that nobody else wants to come and speak, and if not, that's fine too. Okay, seeing nobody else wishing to speak on this matter, we will go ahead and close the public hearing, and I appreciate the comments that have been made there. Okay, back to the commission for discussion. Any further questions or comments that we'd like to make to this? So, kind of for the commission's sake, I guess.
Why don't you start, start
Yeah,
the
to
conversation.
reiterate, to kind of reiterate what I was mentioning to the applicant is, I feel like tabling this particular request and coming back with a broader removal of the hillside overlay from the 3 lots makes more sense. And why these 3 lots, and I think that geographically, that looks like it makes sense as well, based on, the topography of the layout there. The Campbell home does seem to have a different kind of a topography than these 3 that we're talking about on this one. So I am in support of tabling this particular request and then coming back, hopefully at our next meeting, with an expanded request for the removal of the hillside overlay. So.
Kevin, I support that. I like the idea of grouping the 3 because they are similar. They're small lots, they're contiguous. It's a cleaner way than doing a onesie twosie lot. And the other lots are typically bigger, and they're the ones that made the request. So, I support the staff's recommendation on that.
I apologize for coming in late. Corey, can you just explain to me, and I've read through all of this, but why were these 3 lots, or why was the line there on the overlay? Were you able to look historically or know why that was set there?
I don't have that historic information. I looked up the dates of the subdivision, was able to tie those down, but I don't know the
Was the
original.
subdivision all created at the same time, perhaps?
The 3 lots are part of the Rockwood that we're talking about, and the lower cul-de-sac is Shadow Mountain, which is outside of it. Shadow Mountain was developed in 92, and it was 97 or something like that, that the upper lots with the 3 that we're talking about were developed. The hillside was in place at that time, but I don't have a historic record of what justified and how they drew the boundaries.
Okay.
The hillside was in place, and, we talk about that as far back as 85 in the general plan, so I'm assuming somewhere in the mid-80s.
Well, and the big flood was 83.
Yeah.
So that probably may have played into some of this.
It could have in the issue of stormwater management,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Anything
So-
else? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm in favor of reevaluating the zone. I'm not in favor of reevaluating the zone for a few. We haven't really talked about it, but the hillside overlay zone has a lot of additional components that when removed, we'd also be removing from this site, and that
Yeah.
includes fencing requirements. There's an earthquake acknowledgement, there's bonding for developments, there's architectural design that's recommended, there's streets, there's fire protection, different geology things that have to happen. And we haven't discussed that.
Yeah.
So I'm not ready to make any decision today, personally. This is just me, obviously. But if we were to reevaluate it, I'd like to understand what objective criteria using the most recent science or engineering would be necessary in order to appropriately protect our hillsides.
I agree.
So from a pragmatic approach to this one, though, would you just deny the applicant's request and tell them they don't get a deck?
I feel like that's beyond the point, actually, though,
well-
because,
Well,
I'll answer it. When we do a legislative amendment, I feel like we're making the decision for all future possible variations upon this theme.
I get it. Yep.
And so we are now looking forward into this split stream of all the different alternate universes of this hillside, and we're saying, yeah, we're gonna allow that to happen. So it doesn't matter to me whether or not this applicant has no deck or not. I'm agnostic as to whether or not this applicant has a deck, because in my mind, I need to be. We're making a decision for all possible futures of this hillside. That's why.
And then to push back on you a little bit, I do appreciate the additional protections that are provided by the hillside overlay, but as I mentioned before, is it maybe possible that a lot of this has already run its course since this is a well-developed area, and, you know, so some of that stuff that you're talking about really only applies to a new development.
I don't agree. I think that the more developed it is, the more problems you have with hillside erosion, because you're channeling water, you're creating impervious surfaces, and the more cuts and fills that you create on these things as you expand your improvements, it's actually, there's no problem. This is amateur Mason hour right now. So.
That's good.
Well, and I'll add to that, I feel like, as Mason said, there's no way that we can foresee the future 100%, so I want us to really be thoughtful about why was this in place and why was this line where it was in the first place. I'd love to know if we can figure anything out about that. And even though these are well-established homes, which is amazing, and maybe the argument is that, there could always be redevelopment. You know, we're looking.
Yeah, I'm gonna push back just a little bit as a planner on that overall theme, though. I do agree with the Chair Daly's that some of it's run its course, but I also agree with the issue that stormwater management probably is a singular issue with redeveloping these lots and creating it. Our city engineer looked at it and lives right there and said, I don't have a problem with the 3 lots. Now, that may not be good enough. We might want to come back with a direction of, I want to know some data and some details. I think there's space for that. But I don't think you're going to gain anything by having somebody come in and do a geologic study and dig a trench, and then we're going to discuss what's there. I think most of it has run its course. I think stormwater management and slopes are the greatest issue that are associated with it. Our city engineer was supportive of this, but did he give you data, lines, written recommendations? No. So if you're uncomfortable with that and you want that more solidified, yeah, I think that's a direction that the commission could give to us, but I think it's going to be a limited amount of data and return and expense. Otherwise, you're now asking the petitioner to go reinvent the subdivision prior to its construction. And I think that's too onerous to require.
So Corey, on that stormwater management issue though, doesn't the requirement to essentially drain your own property remain whether you're in the hillside or not?
It does. Whether you're in the hillside or not, you're always required to redo it. The issue is does this create a slope that you can't handle the 25-year storm, or additional cuts and fills would exceed the 8 feet or come approach to the 8 feet? And I think that's why the city engineer felt like, no, my lot, that's a problematic, but these 3 lots, if you look at the topography, that cut line sits in Shadow Mountain lots. It doesn't sit inside of these lots. And so I think we could get you some more data, but it's going to be, will it add additional erosion? Will it add additional stormwater that can't be managed? I think those are valid.
I have a feeling Heidi has a comment.
Sorry. I just remember the applicant saying something about he installed a planter bed at the back of his fence, which would be the west of his property, to help mitigate runoff. And then he also mentioned a notion of removing some of his concrete that goes along the side of his house as the RV pad and replacing it with permeable pavers. And those 2 things will definitely help him reduce his stormwater impact.
Yeah.
And so he is taking care, from my perspective, he is taking care of the burden that he creates on his own lot. He's taking care of it on his own lot.
Right. I think removing the pad though was a if necessary type of a thing.
Right.
Okay.
So if that becomes, if I may say, if that becomes like a criteria.
Sorry, you need to
I'm very
come
much-
Yeah, can you,
Microphone.
sorry.
You calling me, Chairman? Sorry.
Yeah,
If that becomes a request to the commission, I would do that, yes.
yeah, that's less preferred, but
Yeah.
an option.
Yeah. If I may also just say that if you look at the east side of the property too, all the way up to the houses that are where the dark green is on the picture there, that's as flat as a tack. All the way through there is just flat as a tack. So to Corey's point, that where the hill really starts to go down is below us. It's out of the area that we're in. So we're relatively flat where we're at. So that's why I felt like throw the plant box in there, that'll berm it up and stop the water from eroding down. So that's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
One of the things that potentially, I mean, tell me what you think about potentially, if we come back and remove that, but are able to create something that would still allow us to have some of the similar guidance for fire and different things like that.
Well, you've already have your fire stuff established, and that's why I'm saying you can't return to the pre-development situation, so you already have that. So what you're really left with is cuts and fills and stormwater management. Stormwater management exists whether you're in the hillside or not. The issue that the hillside introduces is slopes that make it more difficult than flatter pieces of land to handle their stormwater. And so that's what that 40% is, cutting it down to try to preserve some yard space so that if a detention basin is needed for that lot, or several lots, it's constructed and the public utility easement for it is put in place. But even if that's not needed, every lot has to retain its water. So you didn't see the Grazie subdivision tonight, but that's another subject matter, and that's not in the hillside overlay and still has to be done. So to me, your risk management is your cuts and your fills. And
And
we
not
allow
fire?
up to an 8-foot cut in the hillside, which if I were to reinvent the ordinance, I'd be like, whoa. We actually allow a 10, you just can only retain 8 feet. You have to do the 3-to-1 on the last 2 feet. And so that's why I'm looking at it and saying, I could make the argument that much of this should be removed from the overlay.
So talk about the fire, Corey. How does that remain?
Even with redevelopment, that's what I'm interested in
Fire,
too.
the fire flow is the issue of whether you can get fire truck access and whether your tank is at a sufficient level to get the flow rates for a fire rather than just culinary water. And that exists in this subdivision. They're not
To run
struggling
the
from that
hydrants in the
standpoint.
subdivision,
That's the only fire, there's no other like recommendations on certain,
defensible areas.
No, we don't have a wildland fire ordinance.
Okay.
We don't have any of those right now.
Okay. Anybody else like to comment on this?
I know this might sound unpopular, but I'm in favor of just like going forward with it because I don't want I'm nervous by not going forward with it. It puts more burden on this resident than is necessary.
but legally, do we have to still
Well,
notice?
Did you just want to do
That's-
this lot instead of the 3?
Yeah.
so you're saying take option number 2, which is to address the petition as it is before us.
Yeah. Yeah. Real unpopular, I get it.
Well,
I don't know if it's unpopular.
But I'm just saying, I don't see a problem changing the zone for his purposes.
right.
And, yeah, the other neighbors are here, but
I think
let's
that
just,
for me, you know, what I don't like about that idea is the precedent that it sets for that spot zoning type of an approach, right? I think that that's a dangerous thing to do. And my initial thought when I saw this on the agenda was that, no way, we're not gonna do any type of spot zoning, because I think that's terrible. So I like the compromise of, let's try and look at the area a little bit broader. But I can appreciate Mason's concerns about this, and, you know, he wants to look even broader than that, it sounds like. I can appreciate that, but I think that maybe that's a goal for a future planning commission. So,
My position is that those 3 lots, because they're already built out, because it's fairly limited what they can really expand anyway, I think the risk is very low that something bad is going to happen with these properties even 50 years in the future if we remove this amendment. I think it's pretty much, it's a built-out area. We're talking about just those 3 lots that are very similar and contiguous. And that limited scope, I don't see any risk really for the city. I think that's a non-issue.
okay. I'm going to make a motion. I hereby make a motion for the planning commission to table the zone map amendment for land parcel 0216800102, lot 102 Rockwood Farm subdivision to be removed from the hillside overlay zone. Additionally, the planning commission directs staff to expand the request for removal to include lot 101 and lot 103 of the Rockwood Farm subdivision and provide the applicable notices required by ordinance. Afterwards, at a subsequent meeting and hearing, the planning commission will determine the appropriate recommendation to make to the city council.
Second.
Great, a motion and a second. Further discussion to this motion? Okay, we'll start on this end.
Aye.
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 Aye?
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Great. That motion passes. You got it all? Perfect.
Chair Daley?
Yes, go
Address the
ahead.
applicant.
Yes.
I think we can get it on the 14th agenda. I'll verify that tomorrow and get back to you. Their 14th.
Can I respond, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I really like,
Yeah, sorry, come forward if you
I
will.
really like Commission Planner Heidi's thought process and Matt's. Obviously, it seems like law constrains us from doing that. I would, if I can just remind the commission that it's flat.
Yes.
There was a deck there before.
Correct.
It's not like I'm asking for something additional, so.
Well, I think at this point, we will,
So
We'll see.
I appreciate the tabling.
we'll see you again next month.
Yeah,
And we can hopefully move things along next month.
okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, let's move along then to the next item on our agenda, which has also been scheduled for a public hearing. This is a general plan amendment for moderate income housing amendments. A legislative decision. Back to Corey.
Thank you, Chair Daley. So the item before you again is a legislative. We've been discussing this with the moderate income housing. Some of it you should be familiar with. Some of it's probably making your eyes roll back in your heads because you didn't see some of it before. So what's changed? Well, what's happened is that in general, the Planning Commission gave staff a direction to look at the strategies that are selected. They're really thematic to partnering with entities, working with surrounding communities, the county, any other type of entity, and we highlighted those strategies with an additional local strategy that's really specific to Centerville with the idea of employee assistance, mortgage assistance program. So I crafted those, you've seen them, the language should be the same, but what you haven't seen is there's another half of the ordinance or the state statute that requires you to have an implementation plan. It doesn't really say what that plan consists of. What does that mean? And so part of, the discussion is we'll do this in June and we'll do this in July and we'll do that in September and I think that's too narrow of a viewpoint of a timeline, for realities, and I think most people would agree with it. The other timeline is that I felt uncomfortable saying we'll do it in 50 years. However tempting that might be.
Yeah.
So I spun off of the state statute that says you have to have a moderate income housing plan 5 years in the horizon. So I picked that as a guide to say, okay, we're going to try these strategies, and this is our 5-year plan. And so that's where the top end of the hits on the range of 5-year. A lot of these strategies are not something to do in a month. And so then it came down to, well, what should we do? Not a prioritization, but something that says, okay, we can do some steps here in the next little bit while we're working on some other steps that may take us some time to actually accomplish, including the ones that are like an entity. When is an entity, this entity, it could be HUD, it could be Workforce Services, it could be Davis County, Housing Authority, it could be a developer that's got HUD funding, as an entity. What's this entity? Well, that's kind of market driven, unless we're going to go out and buy property and develop, which there's a couple of strategies that says that, and we shied away from it in our discussions. And so those entities are kind of like, well, that's going to be more of 1 to 5 years. If something comes up and we see it or we see an opportunity, we'll take advantage of it. But it might be next year, it might be 5 years from now. Yeah, that's kind of a driven, I said market driven, probably ought to change the language because that means that we're just waiting for developers. But that was my initial selection. What is the marketplace doing? And that's what we're going to respond to is those opportunities of the marketplace. So I don't know if that's a better term or not. So you can see that I have some 1 to 2 years, 4 to 5 years, because I think we're going to have some discussions before we actually get the creation of something. 2 to 4 years you see in there, and then the ones that are kind of like the marketplace, 1 to 5 years, and we can do ours 1 to 2 years. We probably could come up with a mortgage assistant program in a couple of years. Working as a city. But I added 2 more things to that timeline, and I think that's part of your debate. In the state reporting, it's asking us, okay, you've selected these strategies, these are your timelines. When you report to us every year, October 1st, what happened? What was responded? What was the hurdles? What didn't happen? What's going on? How did everybody respond or whatever? And so we want something like that. And so I picked this idea of a progress metric, and I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but I picked it as, like the first one, 5A, is the RDA needs to go look at their programming, their 10% budgeting, and they need to start targeting. They need to start looking for those opportunities in the RDA and talk in their RDA meetings when people come in for increment or if there's a CBGD fund that the RDA can help fund with, like we did with Pheasant Brook. That's going to be that, hey, RDA, what did you evaluate this year? What was available to you? Well, maybe nothing was available, It's during COVID. We didn't get any taxes of the city. We went broke, or something of that nature. So that's kind of that progress, is that they're evaluating their programs and their annual budget, and we can come back and say, this is what we did this year, this is what we looked at year, or this would have to wait till the next increment to happen. So I have that progress metric. There was a couple of them that was a little bit hard to come up with, so that's why it's coming to this market-driven, but that's probably the wrong term, marketplace opportunities. I don't know what we should do. And then I did one more, and I think we can take it or leave it. But in previous employment areas, when we did a general plan, and general plan sometimes says this is our vision, and sometimes general plans encourage something more strategic. And then you create a specific strategic plan to accomplish that overall goal and objective. And so you have this general plan, and then you have this strategic plan. So I stole from what other strategic plans do, is they try to assign who should be cognizant of their duty in this.
I like that.
And so this is more of a strategic plan. Even though this is a general plan element, the strategy selections are really moving away from the vision and the state is trying to get some action, and that action is really a strategic plan. And so I added the responsible agency that at least should be cognizant of what's going on and reminding it, because the Planning Commission's charged with looking at developments and trying to implement plans that come in or a vision to it, but you're not ones that are deciding the budget of the RDA, and you can provide leadership as citizens, but you're probably not the ones that are talking to the developers. You know, right now I'm in the middle of a discussion of somebody talking about workforce housing, and I'm not getting a good definition of what they mean by workforce housing. But you're not having those discussions. Eventually you may have that discussion, but I should be cognizant of my role in there. If these things are happening, you know, what is community development keeping in mind as part of it? And then, you know, I just like making the city council and the city manager responsible for things. It just makes me feel really powerful.
I was gonna
In the
say.
strategic plan. So that's what I've added that you haven't seen is an implementation
The implementation.
issue, part of it.
So Corey, along those lines, I like what you've done as far as that implementation plan goes. It sounds, you know, it looks to me like you've thought about it and kind of thought, yeah, this one's a little more complex or whatever. We think we can do this one quickly. You know, we put down initiation, so for 5D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Right.
All of those are 1 to 5 years, and those pretty much all have, well, most of them have that seek market-driven opportunities in there. As we're reporting back to the state on those, are we reporting back, hey, we're being patient, waiting for the market to present something? What are we reporting back on that?
Yeah, I think that's the harder part because some of these are so intertwined that if we actually create a cooperation with Davis County or surrounding communities, I don't know what's in their moderate income housing plan and what they're participating in and what they're willing to support. And these are some of the discussions so that in maybe year 2, if we're all talking about actually, we're going to come back in and amend these strategies and this progress and be able to start talking about, okay, here's an opportunity over here or here's an opportunity over there. Because they are intertwined. Because if you look at entity, you know, it's really designed around working with Davis County Housing Authority, you're working with Workforce Services and HUD funding. You know, I don't think it's working with just a developer. It might. There's discussions going on right now that's working with a developer. And so that's an entity. And how, if, and is it beneficial for us to even participate into that, which could meet one of these goals. But I really think what's going to come back out is, you know, market-driven opportunities was just my quick staff report thing is saying, look, we're kind of stuck with who's playing and who has available land for it.
And we might be able to tell after everybody adopts their plans, after October 1st.
We can start
We
evaluating
can look at
those
others around and see.
and start hosting discussions with them and looking at opportunities.
So what happens in 4.5 years when we don't have a partnership with an entity? Do we,
Reassess after a year.
well, I know, but we keep kind of,
But I think that's the feedback to the state. You're out here wanting cities and counties to work together. I mean, that's essentially what they're saying with some of these goals. And, you know, everybody's budgeting, everybody's vision and goals for whatever their jurisdiction or the county is. And if they're not aligning in stars, that's the feedback that this idea of regional look at it is not working out too well. Now, that's good and bad. Part of it for us is to say, hey, we tried. Look at us, star on our forehead. But then it gives the idea of the state going, well, maybe we need to step in heavier. And you got to do it. So there's a good and bad to the report of how successful we're being.
right.
So, I don't know what sort of audit authority the state has to this, but I happen to live with someone who's in compliance and audit. And I know that when people say, oh, yeah, well, we tried, without any substantive thing, they get written up. So
Yeah,
we can't just say like, oh, yeah, like we
No,
tried. And
you-
I feel like this is a really good first step. So some things some feedback that I would give is, I would love if we could replace initiation, the word initiation, with like implementation, because initiation would probably refer to like actually starting, and I don't think we want to start in 4 to 5 years, so I would say maybe like implementation, if we could use that word there. And then on some of these things that say like seek market-driven opportunities that specifically relate to some sort of joint or some sort of collaboration, I feel like we could come up, like the 5C progress metric I think that's a good one. Like discuss with these people, or you can say in like 5D1, we could say research federal funds or tax incentives, and discuss with Davis County or local, like I think some of those metrics could be a little bit more honed in on just the 5D section.
You want to be a little more specific?
A little bit more specific. And we can choose, you can choose something similar to 5C, or, something that says, what is a true metric for progress that we can say, like, this is a legitimate decision that we've made, a choice that we've made, and this is the next step. We're not gonna just say, like, we've done it, we're putting it in, stamp the paper, walk away. We're gonna say, we're gonna put it in, and now the next step is reach out to cities or
No,
whatever.
I think so. So I think your suggestion's great. The issue of the audit, we don't know what the audit's going to be, because that's not due by Workforce Service till December 1st.
Right.
They're going to be evaluating the criteria of the annual report and whatever scoring or grade or whatever they're doing. So their evaluation of how well cities are doing in the report and feedback is not due from Workforce Services till December 1st. So the
Well,
audit
and-
program's not ready yet, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that we can't.
And that shouldn't be the reasoning behind
No.
actually putting together a
It
program.
was just, it's just
but-
hard, it's hard for me as a planner to wrap the skill set around a conglomeration that's much larger than my department.
Right.
And so that's the difficulty of committing to too specific of an element at this point in time, because we could say collaborate with the city, the surrounding cities, or the research, and that's fine. I'm not, but we're going to end up in the same spot, is what I'm trying to say. And so I'm not trying to focus that we have step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 in here, even though I think that's what the state wants in an idyllic standpoint. I think the tools and even the state is putting some of this a cart before the horse. They're not even sure how they're going to audit and use this feedback. They just got an idea that they want to do that. And so I don't want to overcommit the
Right.
city either.
Well, and clearly, if they had some sort of guideline form that says, step 1, assess, discover opportunities, plan, analyze. I don't know. If they had that, we could follow that. I'm not asking for something.
No,
that
I think
direct,
your
but I do
comments
think
are
we could-
great. I just don't know, it's, any applies for state and federal funds or tax incentives. Well, who is that? Who does that include?
And that's where
Who is an entity that applies for state and federal funds? Is it a
a
developer?
progress metric might be
Is it-
assign, some staff hours to research what that would be. I don't know. I also feel
Yeah, that's me committing way beyond my level
I also
of
feel like-
dictation to the department.
and
I can give that as a feedback to them, but I wouldn't be able to come up and give you an assignment.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is a direction that's shared by everyone on the commission, but I also feel like as a city, if we are feeling really good about joint agreements or partnering, I feel like we can take the lead on some of these things. And clearly, we don't know what the progress metric is going to be on that. So I think it's okay for us to recognize that, but also in the effort of trying to take the lead and saying, this is what would probably work for our city, is to collaborate with other cities. When we can't just sit back and be like, okay, someone collaborate with us. You know, we kind of have to say, if this is one of our priorities that we feel comfortable with, especially since it may give us some give and take that actually will be beneficial for our city, such as, you know, finding affordable housing that may not fit within the exact boundaries of where we are. If that's something we truly value, then we need to demonstrate that in the leadership, you know,
No,
within.
I agree with you. I'll just be honest with you. I don't see Centerville City being the leadership in all of this. I see Davis County.
Hey,
coordinating with
I'm
the
not
cities.
saying we lead, I'm saying we like initiate, we can, you know, go.
Yeah, that's advocating for the plan. And I just believe that you probably have a temperament overall that's saying, look, we want to fulfill the state. We think there might be some reasonable opportunities, but I don't know if the Centerville is going to take on the task in the county and in our city to solve the moderate income housing problem. So it's a great advocacy. I just don't see it happening.
So, to what you've been talking about, Becky, if we change initiation to implementation, it sounds like the other area that you'd like to see an adjustment to is that progress metric. Certainly on the
Just on a few of
5
them.
Ds.
Yeah, I think the 5 Ds, I feel like you can still say seek market-driven opportunities while discussing with Davis County, or while, whatever it is, just something a little bit more, even if it's like, you know, use that initiation idea of like, what's our first step here? What's our progress that we're taking a first step here? Not that we're like even getting much done, but we're taking a step and then we're going to take the next step.
So in the interest of time, because if that's all we're talking about, I don't feel like I want to send staff back to come back in a month.
Right.
Should we take some time right now, figure out what we want to say on those,
Yeah.
so we can say, here's the plan? But wait, before we do that, any other thoughts, comments, questions for staff from anybody else on the commission? Is that okay if we,
I'm not going to go forward. Yeah. I feel like that's a
is that
good
okay
idea.
if we pause for just a second?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions for Corey?
I think it looks great.
I just want to say it's hard. I just want to acknowledge what the state has asked us to do is hard. And it's far easier in growing, developing a lot of vacant land community than it is us. It just,
Yeah.
sorry,
Agreed.
Corey, that you have to do this. I just want to acknowledge that this is hard.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no obvious answer, and it's going to take coordination with other communities, and it's a big ask, but no, I think I support what's here, generally.
I also want to
The
acknowledge.
points you've talked about, Becky, as far as wordsmithing it a little, I have no problem with that.
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge the work that Corey has done in guiding us to this point too, because he helped us recognize that joint agreement that can really be beneficial as well. So it is hard, like you said. And I may seem passionate about this because I'm a passionate person, but also because this is our job. Our job is to be citizen planners, to support Corey, to have his support for us, and to really look into the future. And this is such a great opportunity, as kind of difficult as it is. This is a great opportunity to have an influence on what our community looks like in the next 5-10 years. And we know what the future is going to hold for Utah as far as population, growth, all of those things. And if we kind of stick our head in the sand, it's not going to get any better. And we're going to have less and less opportunities to actually solve this problem. So I think if we're proactive about this and we present this to the city council with, even if they may not initially want to be the leaders or whatever, if we present this with, hey, let's get ahead of this, let's find something that's gonna work for Centerville, and not just like, la, 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 it's not gonna happen, people aren't gonna grow, the population, then I think we'll be better off as a city and as a community.
No, I agree, and I appreciate the advocacy. I just, the struggle is for me is managing and doing, this comes down to, you know, you have to have something outside the planning department. You have to have something outside the planning commission. You have to have a council and discussions with the county and discussions with creating the nonprofit organization, getting interested community movers and shakers that'll hire the right people under the nonprofit status to manage the properties and handle the subsidized housing. I think we're saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit weak when you just say seek. I mean, really, that's what the word seek is to go out and figure out how you might do this. But I agree with you that seek can also be wishy-washy of like, we looked, nothing out there.
I think we can keep that, but then maybe just add a little more.
So let's jump into that then. 5D1, seek market-driven opportunities. You feel okay keeping that?
I think so. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, it's sort of a general umbrella.
but I think,
If you can come up with something that's a better alternative, I might, what else are you gonna say that's better?
Well, I feel like you could say something like, I mean, let's just think off the top of our heads, some of the entities that we could partner with.
well.
Wasatch Front Regional Council,
But I don't think we know that, right?
League of Cities
Maybe
and
it's-
Towns.
Maybe that's what the progress metric is, research those
that's what
entities.
this is what I'm saying, that's
Well,
exactly, yeah. I think researching that, researching partner organizations, nonprofits, entities, those types of things would be kind of a first step. And then if it's applying for anything, if we really wanted to like go straight to applying for something, you could research that as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, we're gonna research the applicable entities,
Available, you know, what are the available entities? that they partner
available
with?
entities.
So research and, or discover available entities.
Okay. 5D2, same thing? No? Yeah?
Well, and you could specifically say Utah Housing Corporation in that one.
Well, but an entity that applies for programs offered by Utah Housing,
So you could say,
same thing. Research available entities.
Yeah, research qualifying entities, just spinning off, you know, research what qualifying entities.
Qualifying entities, I like that word. Qualifying, okay?
we could also see if those agency or that, of those, like, so I'm thinking at like 5D2 and 5D3 for both Utah Housing Corporation and for Department of Workforce Services, we could even just like contact them. You know, like contact the corporation. contact
Research.
the-
And contact qualifying entities.
There you go.
Okay.
Those are good first
Action
steps. Those are
words.
action words and I feel like they do something.
And what does contact mean? Is it liking something on their Facebook page or?
That's not a contact. I would say a
No.
contact.
Oh, they see that we.
Contact would be, you know, Craig calls and leaves a message or sends an
Phone,
email.
text,
Well,
email.
is this, hey, look, this is like year one progress, right?
Yeah.
Year two, we'll say, oh, well, we learned that. These are the entities and
Make communication, make plans with.
This is the person who you need to contact.
great. Then in year two, we'll contact that person.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
Okay, I like this. Okay, 5D4, same thing.
Do we, anything specific about the Interlocal Cooperation Act that we'd want to include in there, in the metric? What is that specific? Does anyone know?
I have no
Lisa,
idea
do you
the
know
legal
much
entity
about
of that.
Interlocal Cooperation Act?
Yeah, it's just an agreement between entities for cooperative effort. I don't, it's just established.
Isn't
We
it
could,
like
like,
if you're working
That one
with,
could be
a-
like host a interlocal soiree.
No, gee.
I'm just kidding, I'm just kidding.
Or just contacting applicable
I
entities.
second.
You have to have another,
The use of the word soiree.
But
I love it.
I think that it's just saying that Interlocal Cooperation Act is just the code, this, right, the state code that says,
yeah, contact.
How,
Maybe that applies
maybe
for-
gives you guidance of how to have a agreement between.
how that agreement works.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we,
Yeah, better understand that agreement, how about that?
Ooh, I like it.
research and contact qualifying entities
To better understand
and better understand.
and better understand.
Okay. That'll take us a whole year.
I'm sorry, Corey.
Better understand the,
Interlocal Cooperation Act,
okay, great. Interlocal Cooperation Act.
ICA.
Okay, 5D5, are we okay with that one? Because it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Okay, 5D6. Construction and preservation.
I feel like that one could be more general, because it is like any other entity
Yeah.
that does that. And
I would just say marketplace
Leave that one.
opportunities.
Seek
I'd
market,
replace them all with marketplace opportunities.
anytime we use market,
so for all of them, say seek marketplace opportunities?
Yeah.
market,
Because when I reread this earlier this morning, I'm like, well, that makes it, we're blaming it all on the developers.
yeah. I also was thinking, what do you think about
Which is
this,
the state legislature.
Corey? 5B, could we include the planning commission on a responsible agency there?
If you want to be a part of those
I'm just
discussions,
saying-
I am not against it.
I'm just saying, is there any place where we, as a planning commission, could also participate? Take some of the burden off of just the city council and mayor?
Well,
I'm
then-
not asking for more work, I'm just saying like that is our job.
Is that outside, no, but is that outside of our scope though, a community land trust?
So 5B is the only one that I felt like was probably the closest.
I think it could be, and I might be stretching it, just brainstorming off the top of my head. If you're dealing with a land trust, there's conservation easements, we've got trail preservation,
Yeah.
you've got transfer development rights to handle that. Would that involve planning commission envisioning? Yes. Would we get that far? I don't know, but it would.
So I think
Would
5B, we could add us to that one.
Okay.
What do you think?
Anybody have any objections to that? PC.
I feel like ratifying a joint
fine.
acquisition agreement feels still city council. I think,
Yeah.
some of those RDA stuff, that's RDA city council. But I feel like 5B, we could,
Yeah, because you're going to set up a land trust, and there's
Yeah.
various tools to get to diversion to moderate income housing out of those land trusts,
yeah.
donations.
Do you think there's
things like
anything
that.
else that would apply?
Not directly, because it's either very financial, which we don't do,
Yeah.
or it's interlocal, which we don't do.
I mean, we could participate, but it's not like necessarily, we could be in work sessions.
Yeah, work sessions, but we could leave that for. Okay. Any other discussion about this? You okay with it, Becky?
I feel good. I don't know if everyone else feel okay.
So here, well, wait a minute. Time out. This has been scheduled for a public hearing.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and open the public hearing and invite any member of the public to speak to the matter. Seeing nobody, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Great. So we got that taken care of. So let me make a motion, and then we can talk about this, and I'll try and be specific on what we're changing here and go from there. So I hereby make a motion for the planning commission to recommend, is that what we're doing in this case? This the general plan amendments as outlined in staff report to the city council with the following changes. So throughout, we're going to change initiation to implementation. We're going to change seek market-driven opportunities to seek marketplace opportunities. On 5B, we're going to add planning commission to the responsible agencies, the list of responsible agencies. D1, D2, D3, D4, we're going to add research and contact qualifying entities. And then for 5D4, we're also going to add and better understand the Interlocal Cooperation Act. And that's my motion.
I'll second.
Great.
I think there were a couple extra ones on 2 and 3.
5D2 and 3?
And didn't you specifically say something after that? Corey gave us some suggestions, but maybe not.
We talked about, the only thing we talked about along those was to change seek market-driven opportunities to seek marketplace opportunities, and
I
then,
think it was like contact or something.
well, research and contact. Did
Oh,
I
you
not say
said that.
I said that. Research and contact
Okay.
qualifying entities.
Perfect.
Okay. In general, I like what you've done with the place, Corey. You definitely took what we talked about last time, all of them,
All of them.
put them in here, and put some thought into.
But are you sad about that? I mean, look how good he did.
No, it's good. And then put some thought into the implementation part of it, so I appreciate that, Corey. Sounds good.
Yes, thank you.
Any further discussion on this?
No.
Motion?
Aye.
Okay, we'll start over there.
I thought you were looking at me like,
Yeah, oh, now I
you
am,
were like
go ahead.
staring at me.
Well, I was sure you had something to say.
I said,
She said aye.
Okay.
I said aye.
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 Aye?
Aye.
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 Perfect, that motion passes. Okay, sounds good. Moving on then, Community Development Director's Report, City Council Report, Corey?
We have a busy meeting, next meeting.
Yeah.
2 items coming back to you in addition to the ones listed. So we need you if you can make it. City Council approved the single-family unplatted lot amendments as recommended. That's a good thing. So you have a little red highlight that you completed one of your goals.
Great. Corey, the only thing that concerns me on here is Canyon Point. Are we starting over on that one again?
Yeah, you're going to basically take that final site plan and convert it into a PUD subdivision, so they have to go through the conceptual, preliminary, and final process. Often you see developers couple them together, conceptual subdivision, conceptual site, preliminary subdivision, final site plan, then come back with their final, but Mr. Morris didn't want to approach the project that way, so you'll just come back in and you'll start seeing how he's going to divide up the property.
So we're not seeing the site plan again. We already did that. We're done with that.
You're going to see that the subdivision matches the site plan.
Great, okay, good. I was worried for a second that we were starting all over again.
Well, that's because it's been to you a couple times. That's why you're worried.
I think 3 times already, so. Okay.
Before we move on to that,
Yes.
I have a question about, I know we talked about the lane and CW Urban not required to give architectural designs in the initial, or what was it?
They're not, state law prohibits us from single-family development requiring any architectural standards.
Okay, never mind then. Thanks, that answered my question. It was just a surprise to me what they look like, so I was just going to ask about where in the process we can find that out, but apparently we cannot at all.
Nowhere in the process.
Okay,
Yeah.
good to know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's limited to single-family, duplexes, and townhomes.
But aren't those single families?
They're single-family, so we cannot.
Oh, it's, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, those are the 3 entities we can no longer require building materials to. So if you get fourplexes and stacked units, we can still maintain our architectural standards, but the rest of it goes away.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Do I like them? Ask me after the meeting.
I'll tell you right now, I don't like that.
All right, let's go ahead and let's move on to the last thing on our agenda, which is our minutes from the previous meeting. We'll look for any changes that anybody has for page 1, page 2, page 3, I have one on page 3. Line 30, well, let's start on line 29. Actually 28. Chair Daley suggested amending the percentage in CCC blah, 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 from 75 to 60, and the other section from less than 75 to less than 60%. Mr. Snyder said he would adjust the language as discussed, but since Mr. Snyder cannot unilaterally make those changes, I think what you meant to say, Corey, or what the minutes need to reflect is, and bring the proposed amendments back to the planning commission for further action. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
I just want to be clear that nobody thinks
That I can just go in and wipe the ordinance?
that Corey's just taken over. So, I don't think Lisa would appreciate that.
We're,
A lot of people think I already do.
I was gonna say, we're protecting Corey with that one.
Yeah. Well, protecting Corey with the truth in this case?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other changes on page 3? Great. Anybody want to make a motion? I've made all the motions.
I make a motion to accept the planning commission minutes of Wednesday, August 10th, 2022 as amended.
Second.
Perfect. We have a motion and a second. All together, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? So we are adjourned. Thank you.